Good morning. My name is Bill Swindle, and I am the Communications Manager at Child Care Resource Center. I'd like to welcome you to CCRC's Policy Forum 2022. This is actually our 28th Policy Forum, hard to believe. I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, and I have one quick housekeeping tip for you. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. First thing, we're going to hear from Dr. Michael Olnick. He has been the president and CEO at CCRC since 2003. He oversees all programs, projects, and services provided to over 50,000 children and families each month in a service area that spans 22,500 square miles. He's responsible for managing over 1,000 staff members and a budget over $500 million. For more than 3 decades, he served on numerous boards and committees at the county, state, and national level. Please welcome Dr. Olnick.
I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We had hoped to be together to have this discussion in person, but of course the COVID Omicron virus had other plans. The forum started, Bill says 28 years ago, but I seem to remember one going back as far as 35 years ago. And it was at the suggestion of Annabelle Godwin, who was one of CCRC's founders. At the time, there was one paid ECE advocate in Sacramento, and Annabelle thought that by having a local forum, we could get more attention from our local legislators and provide more support for children and families. We've been conducting these forums ever since, with just one break last year due to the virus. This year, we wanted to focus our attention on the dichotomy that's been with us for at least 100 years. Is out-of-home care for children under the age of 5 an educational support, or is it a parental support? Can it be both? The Universal Preschool initiatives that have taken hold in the last 20 years are quickly becoming the norm. The last 2 years has demonstrated the need for much more affordable childcare for children so that parents can work. We saw that society would not function during the pandemic without childcare. Essential workers had to keep working, and that support for children and families was provided by family childcare providers, family, friends, and neighbors. At the same time, we recognize that kindergarten readiness is essential for all children, especially those children experiencing challenging situations due to poverty and racism. Since the Great Recession started in 2008, we saw a reduction of funding for childcare due to budget constrictions. As the economy started to recover, the state did not return childcare dollars at the same rate that it invested in childcare, in preschool rather. And in last year's budget, while there was a considerable increase in childcare budget, it was far exceeded by the investment in universal preschool. Typically, UPK has not addressed the needs of working families who often need 10 hours a day or work non-traditional hours. The California Department of Education's UPK application that just came out does refer to providing 9 hours per day by collaborating with CBOs, Head Starts, California State Preschool, but these are all means-tested programs so that many children attending UPK will not be eligible. Will community-based programs increase fees to offset the loss of income that they will face? Many in family daycare and centers have significant amounts of training in ECE. This large investment in free preschool could put them out of business. Can schools contract for the universal preschool program with community-based programs? It's not clear. Unless we are very careful, we will reduce the number of small businesses that provide the bulk of infant toddler care. The reduced birth rate in many parts of the state could cause teachers being transferred to preschool, often with no early childhood development training. The UPK application does refer to child development hours and experience for these teachers, but it also asks about teachers receiving a multiple subjects credential, which does not include any child development training. And while there is a requirement that TK teachers will need to have 24 units of child development by 2023, will that be relevant for teachers of children who are younger than the original TK age children? In large parts of the state, there will not be enough 4-year-old kids to fill a classroom, so they will be integrated with kindergarten kids. The application states ratios will be 12 to 1 for the first year, but then we'll go to 10 to 1 in the following years if there is sufficient funding. But the best practice is 8 to 1. So where is the mixed delivery system going to be in all of this? My own personal concern is the encouragement of LEAs to collaborate with R&Rs and APs. In LA County, we have 80 school districts, 1 county office of ed, and multiple charter schools all eligible to apply for this program. There are 8 R&Rs and 11 APs in the county. How are we supposed to collaborate with all of those partners? For CCRC alone, we have more than 40 school districts and many charter schools and 2 county offices of ed that we could be asked to connect with. That makes my head spin. So today, we have an update on what's going on at the federal level by Mario Cardona, Chief of Policy and Practice at Childcare Aware of America. Kristin Schumacher from the California Budget and Policy Center will follow with an update on the state budget, and then we'll be followed by 2 panels, one of school board members and a second by childcare providers. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce Mario Cardona. Mario is the Chief of Policy and Practice for Childcare Aware of America. His role provides leadership and outreach to the government, childcare professionals, and the general public on issues relating to the early care and education system. He's also become one of my coffee buddies in the last couple of months, where we meet downtown LA for a cup of coffee just to talk about what's happening at the federal level. So with all that, I want to introduce and welcome Mario Cardona.
Good morning, everyone. I too, like Mike, wish that we'd been able to be together with one another. I was really looking forward to driving north from Orange County to be with you all. But still, regardless, I'm glad that we're able to communicate in this way with one another. I'm happy to provide an update about what's happening at the federal level. I also want to thank Dr. Olnick for inviting me to participate in this discussion. Mike and I met over a decade ago, I think, when he came to advocate all the good work that he was doing on Capitol Hill. And so it's a pleasure to be with you all. So this is a huge moment for our field. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the early learning investments in the Buildback Better Act. And I know that there's been a lot of ink spilled around the details around the legislation. And so I'm going to provide an overview of the bill, but then really looking forward to the discussion with you all and any sort of questions that you all might have that hopefully I can respond to. So I'll start with some top line highlights about the major elements of the Buildback Better Act. So first, it guarantees eligible families child care assistance, including 90% of families with young children. It lowers the cost for families so that no eligible family pays more than 7% of their income for child care. It improves working conditions for early educators by raising wages to be a living wage equivalent to elementary school teachers with similar credentials or experiences. It funds care that supports healthy child development by investing in high quality care. And it addresses the availability of care to make sure families have access when and where they need it. And finally, and most importantly, it promotes equity by targeting historically marginalized communities first as these systems are being developed. On the next slide, I'll dig a little bit deeper into some of the child care aspects of the legislation. So to be eligible for the child care program, children must be birth through 5. The program would last for a period of 6 years. And there's a 3-year phase-in period with a specific amount of money available. And then it transitions to an open-ended entitlement to support all eligible families, meaning that the Treasury Department would have to provide funds necessary to cover the federal share of the cost of the universal high quality, inclusive, free, mostly childcare system. Services must be delivered through a system of mixed delivery, including center and home-based care and faith-based providers. States are also required to spend a portion of their funding towards quality and supply building activities. Beginning in the 4th year of the program, states would be required to provide assistance to all eligible families. So at that time, in the 4th year, the bill would cap co-payments to no more than 7% of income for those families who make up to 250% of their state's median income, which is important. Using the state median income measure allows us to avoid having an absolute income floor in the legislation. Instead, being able to consider state median income accounts for differences that might occur between states, where cost of living is going to be radically different. And so having that measure of eligibility is quite important. In the intervening time, before you get to that 4th year, during that 3-year phase-in period, states would have to focus on extending child care assistance to those at the lowest levels of state median income, which allows for an equitable approach, a more phased-in approach. And notably, the bill does extend eligibility to certain categories of children without regard to income, including children with disabilities or delays and children in foster care. As I mentioned before, costs would be reduced for about 9 out of 10 families with young children, and the legislation would ensure that providers are finally getting the type of compensation and reimbursement they deserve. Currently, providers face significant challenges in the way they are reimbursed, as states structure reimbursement based on the average of the market rate for childcare. But what the market can bear, meaning what parents can afford to pay, does not cover the cost of providing high quality care, which would include better wages and benefits for early educators. So states will have to set payment rates for providers through valid, reliable cost estimation models approved by the Department of Health and Human Services. That model would need to account for variations in the cost of care by geographic area, type of provider, and age of the child. This type of cost estimation model is currently allowed under the law, but only New Mexico and the District of Columbia utilize it. And just to give a sense about the magnitude of this, if you consider the number of young children, kids who are birth to 5, who are currently served under our federal child care assistance program under CCDF, we only account for about 6% of those kids. If Buildback Better passes, once it's fully realized, it would cover about 90% of children. And so it would be a radically different system than the one that we have today, and would provide a significant support and benefit to children and to families and providers. On the next slide, I dig a little bit deeper into some of the aspects of the preschool program. So the Buildback Better Act would allow states to establish or expand preschool services. Eligible children would be those who are age 3 or 4 on the date established by the school district for kindergarten entry. There would be no income, asset, parental activity requirement. And like the child care program, it would last for a period of 6 years. The state would have to provide services free of charge and through a system of mixed delivery that includes licensed child care settings, including family child care, Head Start agencies, and local public schools. States would also have to certify that preschool seats are distributed equitably among these entities. The amount of funding available in the 4th year, similar to the child care program, is reflected in an open-ended entitlement, meaning the federal government would have to provide the resources to cover the federal share of providing universal high-quality preschool. On the next slide, I'll just talk a little bit about what we know about where the Buildback Better Act is. So folks may have read in the newspapers before the holiday that the Senator Manchin and the Biden administration come to an impasse with respect to Buildback Better. Recent reporting and also some of our conversations with congressional leaders and staff have indicated that conversations are ongoing. So what we know is that things are moving forward with Buildback Better, that Senator Manchin is supportive of the early learning investments in the legislation, both childcare and preschool, and in fact wants to ensure that they're paid for at least 10 years as opposed to just 6 years. And we've also heard from congressional leaders that the early learning community's advocacy has been effective, and they've encouraged us to keep doing what we're doing, which includes all of you and all of you who are raising your voices and making sure that they're heard among all the different stakeholders in Washington, D.C. And just to get into a bit of wonky business, where things stand right now is that Buildback Better, the legislation, which includes the early learning investments, passed the House of Representatives. It's currently sitting in the Senate. The Budget Committee in the Senate has to go through and make sure that the legislation meets certain procedural requirements that are required in the Senate to move this particular type of legislation forward, meaning that any of the provisions in there have to have more to do with budget or revenue or spending than policy. And so the Budget Committee has to go through a fairly arcane process in order to determine all of the provisions in the legislation meet that criteria. And so our understanding is that the soonest that they would conclude their work before things move to the full Senate for consideration is late this month or early next. That's the soonest that they can be considered. But it's likely that something wouldn't come out of the full Senate until late this spring, more likely than not. And so that's what we know. Of course, if at any time you want to learn about the outlook for early learning at the federal level, you can refer to the resources we have on our website, which we update regularly. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our policy staff That's what we're there for. And that concludes my presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Perez, and I am one of the government relations specialists here at CCRC. Thank you again, Mario, for that wonderful presentation. I think people are still waking up. I hope everyone has had their coffee. Please remember to submit your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll make time to ask a few questions. The first question I have for you, can you explain the cost estimation model and what this could mean for compensation for early educators?
Okay. So the cost estimation model would constitute a radical shift in the way that we pay for care in this country. So as I mentioned before, right now, the primary method for the state to reimburse childcare providers for those who are participating in the CCDF program or receiving assistance through that program is by taking an average of the market rate and paying them on the basis of that. Now, the market rate is based on what parents can pay and also what providers can subsidize in terms of not being able to pay their providers or early educators as much as they deserve. And so when you are trying to develop a cost estimation model that actually maps out and forecasts what the cost of quality care looks like, then you are completely untethered from that market rate. It's not about what the parent can pay. It's about what is a living wage for an early educator? How much does it cost for a provider to provide that living wage to their early educators and benefits? And also, what does it cost to make sure that a program can meet the needs of families in their communities, including families who have disabilities or children with disabilities or delays or children who are English learners? And so the cost will vary certainly depending on the community that you're in and the demographics that you're serving and the size of the program and everything like that. But what I think is really important for us all to remember is that it will no longer be, there won't be a ceiling on the cost of care anymore. People are going to actually have to figure out what the true cost of quality care is in their communities. And so there is some interesting information that's been put together by New Mexico, who has undergone this process, along with Simon Workman, who leads an organization whose name escapes me at the moment, but he used to be at the Center for American Progress and has been doing a lot of work in this area. And I'm happy to share it with you all at the conclusion of this. But it's exciting, and it's the appropriate direction for the country to be heading in, because we shouldn't be thinking about the price of care when we're thinking about reimbursements. We should be thinking about what it actually costs to make sure that all the people who are in the building are getting what they deserve.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Another question, what is your take on the chances of Buildback Better moving forward in the Senate?
You know, I'm an optimist, so I will say that I'm hopeful that the Senate will take this up and pass it. I mean, so some of this is challenging because, and we shared this with Mike before, who is an interested observer in federal policy and politics, and there are all these trade-offs that are occurring at the federal level in the context of Build Back Better and the different investments that are being contemplated there. And so, as originally put forward by the president, it included an expansion and an extension of the child tax credit. It included all these different climate provisions. It included provisions for paid leave, all these things that are incredibly important for our country. And as conversations have moved forward in the Congress, it appears as if some members are hesitant about the overall size of what the president put forward, and is trying to figure out ways to make it smaller. And so as a part of that, what we've really been concerned about is the trade-offs that people are making and what gets included and what doesn't get included. And for our issue, for early learning, we've been fortunate that throughout the entire consideration of Build Back Better, since when it was introduced by President Biden as a framework last spring and until now, they have never really been in jeopardy, the early learning investments. People have been generally in favor of making substantial new permanent investments in preschool and childcare. At the same time, it seems as if a lot of other provisions that will be incredibly important for children and families in this country, including the child tax credit, paid leave, are in greater jeopardy. And I don't have a sense of where those things are. And those issues, those programs, make it politically fraught. to move forward with Buildback Better, because there are a lot of members in Congress who are really trying hard to make sure that some elements of the original Buildback Better framework that included the child tax credit, that included paid leave, that included substantial investments in home-based care for the elderly and for those with disabilities, that those investments are maintained. And I don't know, about the likelihood that those will be in there. And so the politics of those things are the things that disrupt all of this, I think, for our issue area. But, from all the different conversations that we've had with congressional staff and members of Congress themselves, they are all in for early learning, for both preschool and the childcare investments that are included in Build Back Better. It's just the politics of everything else that makes it a little bit more complicated.
All right, I have last question for you.
Okay.
If Build Back Better does not get passed, is the preschool and childcare portion of the bill moving forward as a standalone?
That's a great question. And so one of the things that allows those early learning investments to be a part of the Build Back Better Act is that there are all these different offsets that exist within the broader piece of legislation, meaning that there are ways that those investments are paid for by making certain enforcement criteria at the internal revenue system stronger, by doing away with certain tax savings that higher earners have been able to benefit from for a long time, closing other tax loopholes. And so the early learning investments that are a part of Build Back Better benefit from all those different offsets and cost savings that are included in there. And so the good thing about Build Back Better and the learning investments is that you're not talking about how you're paying for it, because you're paying for all of the different social spending issues that are included in Build Back Better, including the climate provisions and home-based care and child tax credit, paid leave, all those different things that I mentioned before. And people aren't having to weigh how you pay for a particular thing and like whether or not that decision outweighs the decision to make those investments, which has been generally good. When I was working on this issue 7 years ago in Congress, and you all may recall that President Obama put forward his own proposal for a universal preschool that would have been paid for by a tobacco tax. That was incredibly unpopular, and most people just devoted their attention to the tobacco tax portion of it and the political infeasibility of that. The benefit of the current conversation is that people aren't really talking about what the pay for is, because there's this general offset pay for all the different investments in Build Back Better. That being said, I think that if in the unfortunate event that Build Back Better doesn't pass, there's still going to be a really strong appetite to make significant new investments in early learning. That won't go away. And so I think that both advocates at the federal level, alongside all of our partners at the state and local levels, will be making sure that we're pressuring Congress to move forward with these things. And I should also mention, and I feel like this gets lost in some of the conversation, though I know Dr. Olnick thinks about this a lot too. States are still holding on to a significant amount of federal funding that they've received over the past year and a half for pandemic relief. It is the largest investment that this country has made in childcare ever. And states are still managing their way through how to wisely expend those dollars. We should be helping them think about how they spend those dollars. And we've been doing a lot of work at Childcare Aware of America to track state spending and state decision-making around the use of both stabilization grant funding from the American Rescue Plan and also the more flexible CCDF funding from the American Rescue Plan. And so even if Build Back Better doesn't come to pass, states still have to make decisions around tens of billions of dollars that they received last year for childcare specifically. And so there's no shortage of work that we can do.
All right, thank you so much, Mario, for being with us here today.
Of course.
Like you mentioned, we wish it was in person, hopefully next year. So thank you again for being here with us. And now we have Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick McFarland. I'm Government Relations Manager at Child Care Resource Center. And I want to thank Mario for that great presentation and for the perfect segue into our next presenter as we start to look at California and the budget proposal that we know is coming out next week, and to see how the state is planning to spend its money. So I'll introduce our next presenter, Kristin Schumacher. Kristin joined the California Budget and Policy Center as a policy analyst in 2013 and has been a senior policy analyst since November 2017. Prior to joining the Budget Center, she taught public policy and public administration courses in the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver, and held research positions with the university and the Feminist Majority Foundation. Kristin?
Good morning, everyone. Give me 1 second while I share my screen, and thank you for the introduction, Patrick. All right. So everyone should be able to see my screen. If not, someone please send me a chat or a text. So as mentioned, my name is Kristin Schumacher. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm with the California Budget and Policy Center. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Budget Center is a nonprofit in Sacramento that engages in fiscal and policy research with the goal of improving the lives of low and middle income Californians. At the Budget Center, I focus on issues related to women, children, and families, which includes a lot of work on early care and education and paid family leave, to mention just 2 issue areas. So in my presentation today, I'm going to cover 3 broad topics. I'm going to provide some key context on how families are faring in California. I always like to start with this information because it's important to keep this in mind as state leaders are crafting the state budget every year. I'm also going to provide a broad overview of our subsidized childcare and development system, and then also provide a summary of state and federal leaders' recent actions that affect our state's subsidized childcare and development system. So prior to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the nation experienced one of the longest economic expansions on record. Our last downturn, the Great Recession, officially ended in June of 2009. Yet even after 11 years of economic growth, many Californians were still struggling to buy food, to pay for childcare, just to earn a living wage. And one of the reasons is because California families have had their incomes the incomes for California families have only grown for the richest households in the state over the past 3 decades. So this chart separates households into quintiles based on income, along with the top 1%, which is the bar on the far right that you see here. As you can see, after adjusting for inflation, the bottom 80%, represented with the negative blue bars, have seen their incomes decrease by up to 17% over the past generation. Meanwhile, those at the top 20%, have seen their incomes increase by more than half, and the top 1% have seen their incomes more than double. So this income inequality means that many families just don't have the financial cushion to weather economic shocks, such as the one that many families experienced as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. So throughout this past year, 2021, more than 1 out of 3 households with children had a hard time paying for their usual expenses. That includes things like utility bills, rent, food, doctor's bills, not to mention childcare. A legacy of racist policies and practices, along with ongoing forms of exclusion, means that economic hardship is not distributed equally among Californians. The data from the U.S. Census Bureau's Pulse survey, which is shown here, shows that nearly half of Latinx and Black households with kids were struggling to cover basic bills, along with about 43% of multiracial households or households identifying as American Indian or Pacific Islander. Those data are highlighted on this chart with the orange bars on the left-hand side. So I think many of us know that poverty is a policy choice. We know that by putting cash assistance and increased benefits in a family's hands, we can actually decrease hardship. And we saw this during the pandemic. Stimulus payments, enhanced jobless benefits, enhanced food assistance, medical coverage, and more, they all work to protect households from even more economic hardship. So this chart shows just how effective these enhanced public supports were in reducing poverty in California and in the US in 2020. The bars in orange represent California, showing that 27% of Californians, more than 1 in 4, would have been in poverty without public supports, but that figure was cut in half because of the enhanced safety net. The data for US overall show that same picture. Those data are represented with the blue bars. With that said, despite the enhanced public assistance, 1 in 8 Californians were still living in poverty in 2020. I just want to note that that's a figure that really masks a lot of variation. We know that that varies geographically, with poverty rates quite high in the Central Valley, parts of the Inland Empire, and northern counties too. We know that that figure masks variation for men and women. We know that women are far more likely to live in poverty than men. And it masks variation for Californians based on race and ethnicity. We know that Black Californians, Native American Californians, and Latinx Californians are all far more likely to live in poverty in our state. So data show that families are struggling to make ends meet. It's very clear. But with more than 6.3 million California children, ages 0 to 12, living in families where all parents are working, families often have to pay for childcare, and they often pay more than they can afford. Some low-income families in California, as you all know, do receive help in covering the high cost of childcare via our state's subsidized childcare and development system. And so when I talk about our subsidized childcare and development system, I'm talking specifically about subsidized childcare programs and our California State Preschool Program. In October 2020, which is the most recent data we have available, about 250,000 children received care in subsidized childcare and preschool programs. 14% were toddlers, so under the age of 3. About half were 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and about 1/3 were school-age kids between the ages of 6 and 12. Unfortunately, the system has never been funded at a level necessary to meet the needs of all families eligible for subsidized care. Prior to the pandemic, 2.3 million children were eligible for subsidized care, but only 1 in 10 received full-day, full-year care. In addition, providers that offer the subsidized care are reimbursed on outdated and inadequate payment rates. This undervaluing of caregiving generally is a systemic issue, and it's a function of structural racism and sexism, given that these critical jobs are filled overwhelmingly by women and disproportionately by women of color. And this really does have consequences. The average hourly wage for childcare teachers in 2020 was $14.90 an hour. That ranks childcare teachers, that occupation, in the bottom 7% of over 700 occupations in California. Yet, it should be noted that families rarely can afford to pay more for their childcare. And this is where local, state, and federal leaders can step in to provide critical resources for this essential component of our economy, but have failed to do so on an ongoing and sustainable level. Because our system has been chronically underfunded, resources were not readily available to withstand the economic shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. As you heard earlier, policymakers have taken action to provide relief dollars to help shore up the system. Mario briefly noted the different waves of federal relief dollars that have come through. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what those waves were and just how much federal funds California received. So this illustrates funding for childcare in California due to our ongoing federal appropriations, the annual CCDBG Childcare Development Block Grant Appropriation. That's our main federal funding source for childcare, as well as our federal relief funds specifically targeted for childcare in our states. Those are represented by the orange and yellow portions of the bars. And then again, the gray is the annual appropriation. So the first wave of relief dollars came from the CARES Act, which was enacted in April 2020. California received roughly $350 million in childcare relief dollars. This represented a 62% increase in federal funding for childcare during the 2020 federal fiscal year. The second and third waves of funding occurred during the 2021 federal fiscal year, bringing in $964 million from the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, and then $3.76 billion in federal childcare relief from the American Rescue Plan. From federal fiscal year 2020 to 2021, that was a 500% increase in childcare funding to California. However, before I move on and how I'm going to emphasize later on and throughout the remainder of my presentation, it's really important to remember that these are one-time federal relief dollars. They're not ongoing funds, except for the gray portions of the bars. And then finally, before I move on from this slide, I just want to note that we also, Head Start providers in California also received relief funds. That's not shown here. And then I do want to note that policymakers used an additional $110 million in CARES Act dollars, not targeted specifically for childcare, to provide additional childcare relief in our state too. So this takes us to the 2022 budget agreement, which was enacted last summer for the fiscal year that runs from July 1, 21 to June 30th, 2020. In the budget agreement, state leaders used dollars I outlined above to substantially increase funding for our subsidized childcare and development system. In this slide, just for simplicity, I've kind of divided this into two large categories, though it's definitely not that simple. I've divided it into funding for providers and programs, and then funding for children and families. So across both childcare and preschool programs, the enacted budget included roughly $1.8 billion in new funding for childcare and preschool providers. That included $1.3 billion in new investments in childcare programs using general fund, special fund, and then supplemental appropriations and ARPA dollars. And that was for a wide range of items, including stipends, rate increases, and infrastructure funding, just to name a few. There was also $500 million in new investments for preschool programs using state dollars, Proposition 98 and general fund, and then federal ARPA dollars. And that was also used to increase rates and provide rate supplements and stipends too. The budget agreement also included $988 million in new funding to support families. That included $779 million to increase spaces for subsidized childcare and $130 million for additional preschool spaces too, and then $72 million to continue to waive family fees. So families that were receiving subsidized care didn't have to chip in a copayment to receive that care, which is hugely important when families are afraid that they may not make their housing payment or be able to afford the cost of gas, just as two examples. So within the 21-22 budget agreement and in prior budget agreements, state leaders have allocated about half of the total $5.2 billion in federal child care relief dollars. They've allocated 100% of the CARES Act dollars, 66% of the supplemental appropriations funding, and then 37% of the ARPA dollars. They have included intent language in the 21-22 trailer bill that signaled the intent to use the remaining relief dollars for rates and slots in coming fiscal years, including this one that we're going to begin discussing on Monday. So one thing to keep in mind, again, when looking at these big numbers on this slide is that these federal relief dollars, again, they're one time. That, for example, that $2.1 billion in new childcare investments, $1.5 billion, about two-thirds of that dollars, they're funded with one-time federal relief funds. And for the $640 million in new investments in preschool programs, 1/3 are funded with one-time federal relief dollars. So these are big changes, big investments that we've made in the system, and much of it is coming from one-time dollars. So the infusion of federal COVID relief funding has dramatically increased the funding for the system as a whole. And this chart puts this funding in a historical perspective, showing inflation-adjusted funding from 07-08 prior to the Great Recession through the current fiscal year. The blue portions of the charts represent funding for slots, and the yellow portions indicate funding for quality and support programs. It typically includes dollars for things like the preschool QRS and then the resource and referral network, among other items. I would note that within this chart, the 1920, 2021, and 2022 quality and support portions of the bars also includes relief dollars for things like rate supplements, stipends, and then other support funding too. So as you can see, funding for subsidized programs bottomed out in 13-14 fiscal year, and that just reflected the deep cuts that resulted from the Great Recession. But if you look at total funding from 13-14 to 2022, there's been an increase of about 250%. If you just looked at 2021, last fiscal year, to this fiscal year, 21-22, there's been an increase of about 40%. However, again, it's important to keep front of mind that these big increases are funded primarily from COVID federal relief funds, which are one-time dollars, which you've heard me say over and over at this point. You know, I also want to note when looking at this chart that this system, it's been chronically underfunded. And even with these big gains, we're nowhere close to where we need to be if we want to meet the unmet need for subsidized childcare or provide fair and just rates to our providers in the system. So in addition to the investments in childcare, the budget agreement also expanded the state's existing transitional kindergarten program, as Dr. Olenek mentioned in his opening remarks. So for those of you that may not know, though most of you probably do, Transitional Kindergarten is a 2-year kindergarten program in public schools for 4-year-olds who turn 5 between September 2nd and December 2nd. And this is a program open regardless of income. So this expansion included in the budget agreement included 1 year of planning followed by a phase-in where when fully implemented in the 25-26 school year, all 4-year-olds will be eligible for TK. This implementation period, it should be noted, is far shorter than other states that have successfully implemented a universal preschool program. The estimated cost at full implementation is $2.7 billion. And I want to note here that policy leaders will move funding from the general fund to Proposition 98, which is our dedicated funding source for K-12 schools and community colleges. This permanently increases funding for schools and community colleges, but also restricts general fund spending for other priorities by that same amount. This is rebenching is a term that you may hear when talking about this shift from general fund to Prop 98. In addition to the additional cost of expanding this grade, the budget also included funds listed here for facilities, planning, training, and then also adding some quality components to the TK program, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Olenek as well. As Nina Buthee of EveryChild noted at a prior event, there could be some real unintended consequences if TK rolls out without a solid plan in place, and if policymakers and administrators fail to work with our existing community-based organizations who are already offering services to kids in the 0 to 5 age range. And then I'll end with a slide here about some things to watch. So the governor will release his budget proposal for the next fiscal year by next Monday. This is guaranteed as it's a constitutional requirement. Despite the large increase in our funding in our state subsidized childcare and development system, we know that the increases in funding were driven by federal relief dollars, and they still fall short of meeting the demand for subsidized care or providing adequate payment rates. And so we will look continuously for increased investments in this system. When the details of the budget proposal are released, we also want to track the allocation of the remaining federal relief dollars that remain unspent, which is a considerable amount. It's in the billions. We want to make sure they're used for their intent to stabilize children, families, and providers. We want to make sure that they do so in a timely and in an equitable fashion. And also, we don't want to lose sight of the federal Buildback Better bill, which Mario eloquently summarized earlier. It could be truly transformative, not just for our subsidized childcare and development system, but also for families' economic security too. And then I would close by stating that state policymakers, regardless of federal action on the Build Back Better, have really big decisions to make about the future of our state subsidized childcare and development system. We've received this large infusion, and policymakers need to consider how or if they want to transform this investment into ongoing support to create and fund a robust subsidized childcare and development system. That concludes my presentation. This is my contact slide. If you have questions or comments or want more information on the data, please feel free to get in touch, and then I can also answer questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristin, for your presentation. I do have a few questions for you that our attendees have been putting in the QA box. And as a reminder, if you do have any questions throughout the rest of the webinar, please put in your question in the Q&A box. The first question, a lot of preschool center owners in other states have already received funding from the Child Care Stabilization Grant. When and where is California with dispersing the stabilization grants to child care providers?
That's a great question. And we know that there have been delays in getting money out the door. I think the folks at CCRC, for example, would be better equipped at answering when dollars will be flowing to the field, given that they have experience in administering these programs. So I would kick that to CCRC if they wanted to jump in. But the goal of these federal relief dollars is that they're sent out to providers quickly to stabilize the field. And I would hope that we would continue to work diligently towards that goal. Oh, here's Donna.
Since Kristin asked us to jump in,
yeah.
The California Department of Social Services is working to distribute quite a bit of money. As Kristin laid out, there were historic investments, and the stabilization grants are part of that. I would anticipate we'll see them coming shortly. I also anticipate there will be more as we move into next year's budget conversation. I wish I had exact dates, but.
Thank you, Donna. Next question. Do we know how many families / children the federal funds are estimated to reach?
Yes, we do. I have not run those numbers myself, but I do know that CLASP, which is a DC-based think tank, has generated estimates, as I believe other DC-based think tanks have. Unfortunately, I don't know that off the top of my head, but if you wanted to get in touch, I can send you those resources. But it's it's a huge investment, and it would be transformative for many, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of families in California, potentially.
All right, our next question comes from Jack Hinojosa. State budget surplus estimates is 31 billion. How do we ensure that the surplus prioritizes investment in childcare and development programs? For example, guarantees like K through 12 has with Prop 98.
That's a great question. And since you mentioned Prop 98, it's important to know when you see these really big numbers that a portion of those funds are dedicated to Prop 98, about 40% by our Constitution, and then 20% roughly are dedicated towards paying down budgetary debt and saving for a rainy day, so depositing funds into our Budget Stabilization Act. So the total figure that's available for spending is not 31 billion, because a large portion of it is going to be set aside per our Constitution. So always keep that in mind when you're reading those really big numbers in the headlines. As for how we can make sure that dollars are spent on childcare, I would say it's by you all and your fierce and dedicated advocacy. Engaging early and often in the budget process is key.
Our next question comes from Ellen Cervantes. Is there a risk that a few years from now we'll be facing a childcare funding cliff when the one-time federal funds end? What might that impact be, and how can we begin now to fight or prepare for that now?
Those federal relief dollars are one-time dollars. Without additional state investment or perhaps new investments at the federal level, there would be a cliff. And it would be up to state leaders to determine how they would reduce the childcare and development spending, whether that would be for fewer slots, smaller investments in quality and support programs, looking at the rates. I think that's a risk in the future. And so working to prevent that cliff and working hard for ongoing spending should start now.
Okay. Well, I believe those are all the questions for you, Kristin. Thank you so much again for being with us today. Next, please enjoy this video where we interviewed parents and CCRC board members regarding the benefits of transitional kindergarten.
Hi, my name is Patrick McFarland. I'm the Government Relations Manager at Child Care Resource Center, and I have a 4-year-old daughter. My daughter attends a center-based childcare program in our community. It's a few blocks away from our house, and we pay for that as private pay. So we both work a traditional 9 to 5 schedule, but we both have a commute. So we typically would do drop off sometime before 8 a.m. and pick up after 5, closer to 6 o'clock in the evening. The most appealing thing about TK to us as parents is the cost. The idea of a program being free and at the elementary school in our neighborhood is extremely appealing. One of the things that's a little difficult is the hours of the program don't really match up with our work hours and our commutes. So we would have to find probably before and after school care, and then we would also have to find care in the summer months. So that's one of the challenges of the TK program for us.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeva Miranda and I live in the Canoga Park neighborhood and I have 2 children. I have a little boy, he's 3, and a little girl, 4. My children are enrolled in the CCRC program in the Sign Head Start. My involvement in the CCRC Head Start is part of the parent committee. I am the vice chair, as well as the policy council for my region, and I'm also part of the board of directors. I'm making that decision to enroll them in the transitional kindergarten because I feel like it's going to be beneficial for the child, or for my child in this case. I feel that because the way it works, the cutoff, the December cutoff, I think it will give him a push and get him ready for kindergarten. And I feel that if the program offers that, then that's going to help my children to be prepared for kindergarten, not only like cognitive, but also, motor skill socialization, interactions, and, it's going to help him in the long run.
Hello, my name is Alejandra Arita. I live in the San Fernando Valley area, and I am a mother of one. My daughter is 5 years old, and she's right now in kindergarten. So I drop her off around 7:45 every morning, and she gets out at 2:15. I work from 8 to 4:30. I have the help of my family. Mostly my mother-in-law is the one who helps me in case she cannot pick her up. My mom, it's also nearby. So I decided to enroll her in an early education center because, my mother-in-law was able to take care of her, but I felt she needed to learn more. So if my family was not able to help me, and pick my daughter up, I don't know what I would have done, with an early education center. I see the struggles of my friends and they tell me, all the time, you are lucky that you have, your family helping you. So, and I know I'm lucky.
So I'm Adam Pilder. I have two children, Matthew Pilder, who is 2.5, and Brooke Pilder, who is 8.5. My daughter is now in the 3rd grade, and my son currently has a nanny. He's at home right now. Socialization is, I think, the most crucial component in a child's development. And for her, it really helped her a lot. It kind of brought her out of her shell because, she was shy before she went into preschool. We need to look at other options in place because, and, it can be costly too. I mean, to send your child to preschool, that costs a lot of money. And we're not, it doesn't have to be a faith-based preschool. It can be, secular. I mean, we just want to find the right program for him.
Hi, I'm Alma Cortez, and I'm an associate professor at Pierce College in the Child Development Department. And I am also a board member of CCRC. My daughter, Eva, is 7, and my son is Lucas, and he is 5. And they both attended TK. One is currently in TK now. The specific classrooms that are for kindergarten may not necessarily be TK ready. And so I know that some of the school districts are expanding their spaces, but I don't know if the schools are specifically ready for more younger children on their campuses in terms of the bathroom sizes or the sink sizes, et cetera. One of my concerns is also making sure that we're not keeping our expectations here and that we're kind of lowering them here, and so that and not because our kids are not capable of doing it, but they're not capable of doing it yet. And we want to make sure that we can support them and make them feel like this is their space, they can grow and they can learn, and it's okay they can't do it yet. And here's how we're going to support and guide them in those spaces.
That was a great video. I always love hearing and learning from parents. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Dominguez. I am a senior government relations specialist at CCRC, and I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator for our first panel discussion. Christina Alvarado is the executive director of the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, a position she has held since 2012. Prior to this, she was the executive director of Child Care Information Service, a former child care resource and referral agency located in Pasadena, California. Christina has advocated for and worked in the early care and education field for over 20 years. And our next panel will be of school board members, and Christina is also a school board member herself at the San Gabriel Unified District. Christina, go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to facilitate this panel. I know we all wanted to be in person, but it is what it is. So let me introduce the panelists. Kelly Gones serves as president of the Los Angeles Board of Education and proudly represents Board District 6, which encompasses most of the East San Fernando Valley. Since her election to the board in 2017, she has championed the needs of the most historically underserved students. She has authored policies leading to increased services for homeless students and to remove barriers to college for all high-need students. Board President Gones has helped to increase the investment in early childhood education in Los Angeles Unified and pioneered the expansion of ethnic studies for all students in the district, including as a high school graduation requirement. Welcome, Board President Gones. Is Gary Hardy here? Okay, we'll go ahead and skip to Jackie Wong, and then if Dr. Hardy joins us, we'll be happy to introduce him. Jackie, how you doing? I know you.
Good morning. How are you, Christina? How's everybody
Good.
doing?
Pretty good.
Hi, Kelly.
Jackie was elected to the Washington Unified School District Board in West Sacramento in 2016, where she currently serves as a board president. Since her election, she has been able to bring additional resources to the district to meet critical needs, such as increasing student mental health and nutrition services. She is also a professor for Sacramento State School Nursing Credential Program and serves as Chief Deputy Director for First 5 California. President Wong has 3 decades of policy experience advocating for educational and economic equity for children and families. Welcome, Board President Wong. And if Board President Hardy is not here yet, we will jump into the program. As a board member, I know that board members have a great deal on their plates. As you know, we all know too well. My own district this week had to close down the high school and the middle school because we needed to do contact tracing because there were students, that were infected. And as you know, they go from class to class in high school and middle school. So it gets a little bit more difficult. But that's just one thing that's impacting us across the state. And as we set our sights to the future, and there will be a brighter future post-COVID, right? We really need to look at many things that will be impacting us, but one of those is the implementation of TK expansion as approved by the state and as mentioned by Dr. Olnick in his intro, Ms. Schumacher, and in the video that we just saw. TK expansion will require school districts to consider how to implement, including facility issues, training teachers for TK, and early brain development, and keeping in mind how the youngest kiddos learn through play. So let's move into the questions. Dr. Gones, if you want to go first, President Gones, sorry, if you would like to go first. What are your initial thoughts about TK implementation and how it may impact your district?
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me as part of this important conversation. And it's great to be with such an excellent group. And thank you for giving me the honorary doctor title. It's just Board President Gones at the moment. But I'm really grateful, that the governor has taken the steps to expand transitional kindergarten to make it available to all 4-year-olds in California by the 2025 school year. We know that investing in high quality early childhood programs is a proven way to shrink the opportunity gap, lift our families out of poverty, and stimulate our local economy. And I think given the pandemic's disproportionate impacts on low-income communities of color, which is predominantly who we serve here in LA Unified, this is exactly the type of investment that our state needs to be making at this particular moment. I also feel extra strongly because I am a mom of a baby and a toddler. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. And so I know how important this time of life is for our young children, but also what a struggle it is to find high quality, affordable care in an area like Los Angeles. And so this is incredibly important. Here in Los Angeles, the board actually unanimously approved a resolution back in April of 2021. So before the action towards universal TK, to commit to providing universal preschool to every 3 and 4-year-olds in Los Angeles by 2024, leveraging our school-based programs and also working hand in hand with nonprofit and home providers. So we had already begun this conversation around how do we get to universal programming, again, working with our partners through the expansion of our preschool programs. And so that state action was really welcomed by us, and we were ready. So we have robust preschool programs, including, importantly, our expanded transitional kindergarten programs, or our ETK programs, where we are already serving more 4-year-olds than are required under TK right now. So those will be an essential part of our efforts to move towards universal TK. Of course, there will be facilities issues that we need to work through. We are already exploring those dynamics and planning, as well as staffing. So those are I think the 2 main areas that will be really critical when it comes to implementation, but we are well positioned given the board's leadership in this area, as well as our existing programs. The last piece that I wanted to mention is just that in our 21-22 budget approved in June, the board also approved utilizing some of our COVID relief dollars to make a down payment on expanding these programs. And so our ETK programs are growing. We're adding 75 new programs in the next couple of years, which will allow us to get closer and closer to all 4-year-olds. Thanks.
Thank you. That's excellent. And I'm glad to hear you're using some of the COVID dollars already for thinking through TK. In my own district, we set aside some funding to train teachers, to do some professional development for teachers on early brain development and get ready for that. So it's good that districts are thinking about this. And let's move into Board President Wong's response.
I feel like you're part of looking at the bios, you have a president's circle so on this entire panel. So because Jackie is
right?
It is. So actually really great panel, really great. Thank you for inviting me, as I've worked with many of you with multiple different hats. One of the things that I forgot to actually include in my bio is actually I sat on a board of a child development center, the East End Child Development Center, the one that actually is attached to the California Department of Education when I was there. So have a long history there. I wanted to actually provide some context. I feel like it's almost a tale of 2 cities here. We have LAUSD and Washington Unified, which is in West Sacramento, which is we're considered a suburban school district by all means. We have about 7,500 students. We're still a Title I district. And to be honest, we have been doing this work since 2006. So part of a coalition called, Dr. Hardy, I don't know if we want to take a pause for an introduction real quick before we.
Sure. Since we've stopped, why don't we do that?
I apologize.
We keep saying doctor instead of board president. I don't know.
You're part of a board president circle,
yes.
Dr. President Hardy. So.
Welcome, Board President Hardy. And thank you for joining the panel. You were elected to the Linwood Unified School District Board of Education in 2014, and you currently serve as board president. You serve on several boards and commissions, including the California Student Opportunity and Access Program Project Grant Advisory Committee. Boy, that's a mouthful, huh? Through this work, you have led the creation of a new department in your school district that could better address race relations and educational disparities, making Linwood one of the few school districts in California with a department fully committed to ensuring all students are provided with opportunities to succeed. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We had moved into the first question in terms of considering the implementation of TK that was approved by the state. And Board President Gonis has already responded, and then Board President, can I just call you guys by your first name?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
We'll be here forever.
I feel like I've known you for a long time. Please call me Jackie. in many hats.
And then Jackie was responding to the first question, and then Gary, you'll go next.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are your initial thoughts about TK implementation and how it may impact your district?
Great. And I apologize for the disruption, but just want to honor the presence of President Hardy when he joined. So in any case, this has been a journey for us since 2006, when we actually built what's called Up for WESAC, where we brought together the school district, the city, and several different nonprofit providers, as well as the Resource and Referral Center in our community. So you can, and I have to say that life is interesting full circle, because I've just joined First Five for a little bit, and Up for WESAC was able to be created because of a First Five California grant. That actually really honored and kind of recognized the importance of early care and education and collaborative approaches. If I say long before it became a trend, a topic of conversation now. So excited. And your question is, how do I feel in this moment? Is that there are so many shoulders that I stand on, that we all stand on, for decades and decades of people who have been working and fighting at the state and national level to make this a relevant conversation, and just grateful that it is a conversation, that we want to expand TK for all 4-year-olds. To that end, and how is it impacting your district? Kristin, you said it. I don't know about you, but even as board president, a lot of our topics are actually COVID related, right? Not that this is not also important. I actually have had to have very serious conversations with my cabinet about, like, when are we going to start kind of breaking, even though we have been doing this for 20 years, right? Or so. Again, starting small and going to scale. The question then becomes, like, what are we doing on balance, given kind of the other, what I'll call kind of very important public safety issues, and how do we get to a space that's teaching and learning, and that's a long-term? I think that earlier one of the presenters talked, or one of the audience members asked about a fiscal cliff. That's real. That's very real, right? And so how do we actually create longevity? And I don't see that without really creating a true mixed delivery model that is centered in parent choice and real parent choice, right? And a school district acknowledging that we can't serve all people and meet all their needs, right? So just being really honest and real, and being really, really creative about how we might be able to work with, CCRCs and our childcare providers to create, a program that works for families and the communities. And again, my perspective is different from a suburban Title I school district, that I think that what we've always said in West Sacramento is, like, we're Title I. We have all the kind of socioeconomic differences that large scale Title I school districts have. So what can we pilot? What can we do? And I'm excited to be part of this panel, because again, sharing my story and what we've done since 2006, I think presents a possible roadmap for other larger school districts, rural school districts, to consider things that we might be thinking about, and to be really direct with people. Like, you can't snap your fingers and by 25, 26, you'll be where we're at, right? Like, it's taken decades for the relationship, for the infrastructure. And it runs with a strong partnership with our city, which, by the way, also runs our after-school ACEs programming. So I know that there's a question later today about how we're meeting the needs, but there's been an infrastructure that we've been working on even before this effort to actually create more localized collaboration.
Great, thank you. Yep, those are all great thoughts. Gary, would you like to address that question?
Sure, and thank you for the kind introduction, and my apologies for my tardiness. I had a long commute from another Zoom meeting this morning, so a big one so far. But as was already said, I can't underscore the importance of early childhood education for communities like Linwood, where when I was growing up, there was only 2 options. I was in Linwood schools from preschool through high school, and even some adult school courses. And at the time, it was sort of a premium. And we knew that in order to meet the needs of our parents, and even our staff to some degree, we had to figure out a way to fill in the gap of access, first and foremost, not forgetting the benefits of universal childcare or preschool on community as respect to closing the word gap, closing the achievement gap, right? We understood that that was part of our moral imperative to make sure that we provided access and opportunity for our early childhood education. So with implementation on our standpoint, we didn't have the funds, just being honest. The resources weren't there, the sites weren't there. So we had to do a few things. One was starting with seed funding that we could allocate from our district general fund or other sources. The other was finding other community partners that could join in with us on the effort. The other was applying for any grant that we apply, we could qualify for. And in a few short years, we've been able to expand from only 2 programs to 12 programs, and now should be cutting the ribbon on a 0 to 3 preschool site, 2 preschool sites shortly. So for a district my size, that's unheard of, but it was a commitment that we made to our community that we knew would have a market improvement on the quality of education that we provide to our community. And now we're in talks of how to further connect and collaborate early childhood education with our K-12 program and also adult school. So now we're figuring out, like, how do we place adult school classes on the same site as our preschool program, so the parents can, benefit from childcare that is robust and comprehensive while they are gaining skills for this new marketplace that we're seeing in the wake of COVID. Because now we know that parents are trying to figure out, some of them don't want to be essential workers anymore. Some of them are going back to school to find new skills for a lot of reasons. And we have to meet the moment now and provide them with the undergirding and support to allow them to reach their dreams for their nuclear family, but also the larger goals of our community as well.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question, what are potential solutions your district is considering to ensure full day and full year opportunities for working families who place their children in transitional kindergarten? So let's start with Kelly again.
Sure. So great to hear other folks' responses as well. I think it's a great learning opportunity around what are different districts doing throughout the state. So on this question, all of our district's TK offerings are full day programs, and they follow the same academic calendar that our K through 12 schools follow. In addition to our school-based TK offerings, we also have early education centers, or EECs, that operate on an extended school year, where we provide programming for those who are not yet eligible for TK programs. So 2.5 to 4-year-olds, including some of our students with disabilities. In general, as a district, I think expanded learning opportunities beyond the traditional school day and beyond the traditional school year have become a heightened priority, especially in the wake of the pandemic's impacts on our students' families and communities. And as part of that effort, we actually opened up summer school opportunities for our ETK students, so for our 4-year-olds, last summer for the first time ever. And it was really successful. I know that families really appreciated that additional learning opportunity, and we saw a lot of growth for our students. And so I think as a district, we're looking forward to more investments in those expanded learning opportunities and making sure that we're being inclusive of our preschool students in our TK programs, and also hoping, obviously, for additional investments from the state and the federal government to make sure that those are sustainable opportunities moving forward. I also envision that we will work in close partnership with our partners in the childcare space, home providers, et cetera, to make sure that we're meeting all of the needs of our families who we know need access to care throughout the year.
Thank you. Jackie?
So Michael hinted towards it at the beginning. We are actually seriously considering contracting out some of our money with the infrastructure we have with our current provider system, right? Some of the needs, just to be honest, we are focused on, if we're rooted in equity and inclusion, is some of our, actually, I say a lot of our home care providers actually have been, they have language issues. There's food and cultural issues that they can access in settings that are much more comfortable with some of our families, right? And can be served more appropriately in some cases. I think also, again, being a 15+ year program, is that there's always the the Q issue, right? The quality question and consistency in that. And I would say that how we've addressed it in Washington Unified and West Sacramento is that quality isn't a rating system per se. It's actually meeting providers where they're at, what they need within kind of this cadre professional development opportunities. And we've actually funded through the city actually how to, what are there books, are there things that our providers need to actually, and in some cases I would say, and you all know this, you're experiencing this, is that we have a sub shortage, right? What's interesting is that some of our provider owners or childcare owners, they're subbing for us in our K and TK programs. That's how good they are. Right. And so we've really invested in this mixed delivery model for a very long time. And so we're going to actually just check in and see if we can build on that model, right? And in regards to, we've had TK for quite some time. It's part day, but I think that I'm assuming that this full day question is about the 9 hours, right? Not just the technical 2:30, like, because sometimes my children get out at 2:30 and that's considered a full day. We're talking about the 9-hour requirement. And for us, we're the on-campus programs, we're going to have to work with our city, who again runs our ACES program, about how to put that together, and our other childcare on-site childcare providers as well. President Hardy, I appreciate the adult learning, and that's a really great thing. So I think we've been kind of hit and miss with the adult learning bringing on campus, what that might look like. So we're actually trying to think creatively as a whole district as to how to implement this. And contracting is possibly one of those things. We're going to proceed until we're told that we can't, which I haven't been told that we can't do it. So we just have to make sure that their standards aligned learning happening, right? So.
Great, thank you. Gary?
Great question. I'm trying to figure out what hasn't already been said that we're sort of trying to model in Linwood. But I think the answer to the question is sort of what I alluded to earlier. My first answer is our 0 to 3 program was an effort to meet a gap. So being creative and finding solutions to a gap of childcare access, we knew we had the land, the space, even in a landlocked community like Linwood, but we didn't have the funding and the infrastructure to do it. So we found a partnership with St. Anne's and the LA County Office of Education to make it work. And oftentimes it's sort of a district or a board having a vision and then giving directive to staff to do their best to see it through, to make it a reality. Because again, we made a promise to our community around providing greater access and more so important now, in a community that's largely, as I mentioned, essential workers, childcare access is that much more important. I also mentioned sort of, the idea of bookending our education programs in Linwood. We talk about the idea of being lifelong learners, but oftentimes there's no real infrastructure around that. But if we're talking, enrolling kids in our schools at 0 years old, and then, a robust K-12 program, and then an adult school program that is robust, but also mirroring our full day and partnering with local colleges and universities as well, we can truly say we're a lifelong learning district, and that we have provided the proper equity, access, and justice for our community. So I think the answers to that question around the solutions that we try to seek are the ones that are really in line with our mission and vision, and that's educational excellence for all students. And we know that requires certain components being in place, certain partnerships, certain mindsets, and it starts as early as possible, right? And I think one of the things that we look at is the introduction of education as sort of a pathway to a better life for many people as early as possible. And you do that with early childhood education with robust TK programs like ours are also full day, but how do we encompass the entire child and as a byproduct, the entire family to create them, on a path of lifelong learning as well.
That's right. Life doesn't begin at kindergarten. And the last question we have is, what community partnerships, and some of you may have already answered some of this, but what community partnerships are you hoping to build to meet the vision of universal preschool, such as community-based organizations, partnerships with childcare providers, Head Start, et cetera? Kelly?
Sure. Well, I think we've touched on this a bit, but as we embark on this ambitious effort to provide universal TK across the state, school districts alone are obviously not able to meet all of the needs that are found in our communities, and we know that families have different needs, which can be best met by different providers. And so that's why an essential part of the resolution I authored of our approach in LA Unified is an intentional mixed delivery system with our partners who are already providing high quality services in the communities that we serve. We know that in LA County alone, only 1 in 6 income eligible children are enrolled in early childhood programs. And so I think it's really important to be conscientious of that context as we embark on this work more deeply. Additionally, as the state continues to work to expand TK offerings, it's also critical that there's a unified effort to really advocate for continued sustained resources to ensure that all providers, from school districts to community-based providers to home providers, can continue providing high-quality, developmentally appropriate programming. And that includes funding for professional development, investing in career pathways, and ensuring developmentally appropriate ratios can be met. And I think in terms of the Los Angeles approach, I envision this as, a coordinating collaborative that we can build, because there is a mixed delivery system already in existence. In my humble opinion, it maybe could be better organized and more systematized and more transparent for the families that we serve. And so I think by creating that sort of planning body, working hand in hand with those in the private space, the childcare space, our Head Start providers, which we already have relationships with in many ways, we can embark on this planning effort together in a way that helps support all of us in doing the work that we are all committed to doing, which is ensuring that our babies and toddlers are well served.
Thank you. Jackie?
Again, so for us, I think I failed to mention that the evolution of Power Preschool has now evolved into what we know as the West Sac Home Run Project, where we actually have that focus from zero to college and career with that. And that's the infrastructure with the city of West Sac, right, that I started with. They were our primary partner. They also have, and I'm not sure this is probably true in many cities, is that there's an early childhood department with the city. And we work closely with them, and they fit through the West Sac Home Run Project. We have these conversations about how we will roll this out. Let me also be direct and real, because I'm just kind of on the ground, and I think that it's maybe beneficial for those who are watching, is to understand that this is not going to be easy. I tell you that we've been doing this since 2006. I can tell you also all the number of superintendents and different cabinets we have had over time, right? Our cabinet is fairly new. We're less than 1 year old. We actually stole somebody very good from you, Board Member Gomez. So I'm really, we're really, really happy that she is with us. Dr. Hildreth is our superintendent and such a rock star and totally gets it. I don't know if you knew that. But she is now ours. I'm sorry you couldn't keep her, but she understands this vision. And at the same time, relationship building, as we all know, takes some time. And so we're slowly trying to relearn what that table looks like, educating our new cabinet internally, building those relationships. But I think beyond what I have learned from being at part of this process as an elected, as a parent and whatnot, is if you have to build the formal infrastructure, right? So to President Gomez's point, it does exist. It exists in all communities, right? We will tell you it exists in all communities, but it hasn't been formalized in a way that is like Up for West Sac, very intentional, having those goals, having those MOUs and agreements, right, of what we want to do to formalize in West Sac Home Run, right? We're happy to share models. We're happy to do that. And so I think that's for us, is that we're going to continue doing what we're doing. We have an agreement with YC, Yolo County Office of Education, who runs our Head Start. They're on our campuses, right? So we're going to enhance the conversation. And I think to be really direct, is that there's that conversation of how do you begin to bring providers who were seemingly outside a K-12 system to have, and what we've known along, they've been part of our journey, right? President Hardy says this, it's zero to like career and college, right? Like, how do we understand that this is a whole community effort, right? Like, and begin to talk to the people and the cities and communities to understand that we cannot do this alone, but we have to build an infrastructure that lives beyond, quite frankly, our elected legacies, whatever that may be. So that's it. I'll get off my like soapbox.
Thank you. And Gary.
I totally agree, Jack. I think that is sort of what again, the moral imperative that we talked about in Linwood is meeting the entire needs of the family and of the child. And one of the initiatives that we seeded in Linwood was the Ready to Learn initiative. And what that really was a program around referring students to services and resources that we identified over the course of their learning with us here in Linwood. So it could be access to vision screenings, dental care. It could be support with SNAP benefits and housing, whatever that may be. This sort of initiative has to also trickle down, for lack of a better term, to our early childhood education programs as well. So as soon as a student is within our program and we identify a need, our goal is to match them with the appropriate resources and support. And I think that is sort of where the 30 plus partners we have in Linwood and our Student Health Collaborative come into play, that are the infrastructure that supports what we do in the classrooms. Oftentimes students face things that are beyond their control once they leave our school building. And we try to do our best to support their resilience, their perseverance, their grit, and their persistence with all that they're facing. And I don't have to bear the lead here that was no more apparent during this pandemic when students were sent home from schools, where in many families, the school is the center of their resource and their survival. So we're sending people to situations that are less than ideal, right? We know that they come back and we have to figure out a way to bridge that gap and to connect them. So I always think about, the community schools model, but just more so the idea of a village, and that it took a village in Linwood to raise me. And in a lot of ways, I try to replicate my experience through our schools, where I still know my preschool teachers. I still know my preschool classmates in Linwood because we built a village for young people and a pipeline for success for kids that we identified having promise and potential. But my viewpoint now is that we have to view each and every kid with that sort of perspective and purview. And what that means is giving them the entire bevy of menu of products, of resources and supports they need to thrive, and at the same time support the family, because we truly believe in equity is identifying those individualized needs and identifying the appropriate resources to connect them with. So the vision of Universal Preschool is the same, and it should follow our students on through college and career. And then on the back end of those bookends is sort of connecting alumni with our schools and our districts and finding a way that they can give back and support the next generation of learners and or bring their kids back to us once they have them, given that I know the birth rate in LA County is lower, but we want our alumni to choose home when it comes to career and it comes to raising a family as well. And the robust offerings that we have in early childhood education is what's going to make that more real for them.
Great, thank you. We're going to move into a very brief Q&A session. So I will turn it over to Patrick. But before I do that, I want to say thank you to Board President Gonis, Board President Wong, and Board President Hardy. It's good to be on this panel with you.
Thank you, Christina. We have a question for the board presidents. How can private preschool/childcare centers join the move and be in partnership with districts and provide education for children? Anybody can start.
Go ahead.
Jackie, I don't mean to cut you. I actually have to go distribute some rapid tests to our families at a middle school here. So I'm just going to bid you all adieu. Thank you so much for having me on this wonderful panel. Bye.
Thank you for the question for us. And I think I would tell you every school district is different. So my answer for West Sacramento is to come to talk to Justine Jimenez, our city, who is our early childhood person at the city, and get plugged in. But we are meeting with providers already. And I just want to be clear that we are talking with, working with both public entities and private providers. So that's what mixed delivery is. So we're hoping, I don't know what advice President Hardy might have, but that's we're trying to push in and be intentional to invite our private providers to the table.
Right, like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of times, again, we have a vision for what we want to see accomplished, but don't always have the resources or infrastructure to do so. And a partner that exists outside of our district may. So it's just finding out what we do well and what we have the capacity to do. And if that is some outside of the bounds of the project, then finding the appropriate partner that can, give us the quality that we need in achieving our goal there. So For us, like I said, I can think of 30 partners that we have in Linwood that makes this machine work. And many of those partners, we try to make sure that we are not duplicating services. We're not double paying for something, or we're not leaning into an area that we are not best suited to serve, right? And finding out who the experts are in the area that we can partner with to make our work more efficient.
If I can also make an offer for others who are listening out there and be curious, I'm happy to have you come visit us, or COVID, but just kind of learn more from our district and what we're doing to see if there are elements of what we're doing that can work and be scaled wherever you're at.
Yeah, and to that, I think the visits could be virtual. We could always hop on Zoom with our early childhood education teams and figure out a way to answer some more detailed technical questions as well.
Great, we have another question. What, if any, concerns do you have with staffing now with TK expansion?
President Harding, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. I think they're the same as the concerns we're having across the board with the teacher shortage, I think we have a staffing shortage at almost every level of classification. So I think the concerns that we have to have are ensuring that we just don't get a body to fill a seat or to fill a role, but that they are of quality, that they're qualified, but also from a mindset standpoint, really align themselves with our mission and vision as a district. I think one of the things that I've learned over my career is that it's hard to teach people to care. But you can sort of identify the candidates that care if you have a comprehensive interview process and screening process to make sure that people that you do hire are aligned with what you're trying to do for young people. So it's really just the I guess overcoming the urge to just get a person and doing your best to get the right person in the face of a statewide, really nationwide shortage in education.
I'm not sure if people have seen the studies, but people are probably really familiar that we have a 50,000 teacher shortage in K-12, let alone TK. For us to go to scale, we'll need 11,000 new TK teachers, right, who understand the developmental and behavioral needs of young people and how they learn, how they interact, how they grow. So I think for us, I think we need to be creative about what that journey might look like. I'm going to throw out there the idea of micro-credentialing and not dismissing the expertise of our providers who've been doing this. To your point, Board President Hardy, is that, you can't teach heart, right? You can't teach what's in here. And if you visited the child care centers, folks who have been doing this for decades, they may not have certain credentials after their name or whatnot, but they are pretty expert. So how do we actually begin to have a PD conversation about micro-credentialing, or how do you actually recognize that as part of meeting the need of TK teachers?
We don't have any more questions in the Q&A, so if folks have questions, please add them. But I wanted to jump in with a question both for Jackie and for Gary. Can you talk a little bit about the communities that your districts are serving and just how you approach that as a board president and wanting to serve the culture in the community, and how that reflects in sort of the early education programming and programming throughout the district? So could you describe the community and then sort of how you specifically serve them?
I would say, I think I mentioned, I kind of alluded to, our community is a community of essential workers. The median income is at or below $40,000. So we have a community that is sort of high need and under-resourced. We are at 98% free and reduced lunch. We have, I think, of 14,000 students, just under a good percentage of those are foster homeless youth. We have rising populations in our SPED programs. College attainment rates are lower than the county average in MIC as well. So I think the way that we approach serving and supporting the community is recognizing where we are, the inherent challenges that we face, but also the incredible potential that lies in front of us. So I don't look at our community from a deficit lens about what we don't have, but I look at sort of what we need to do to realize who we are as a community. So again, as I mentioned earlier on, that 1 million word gap, once I figured out what that was and sort of, what that is derived from, it's really just the difference between the language in Linwood versus the language in Beverly Hills. 17 miles away, but the language of survival is what we speak in Linwood, and thriving across generations is what's being spoken in Beverly Hills, and that starts with, language acquisition at an early age, and that happens in early childhood education. That happens with family trips and tutors and supports that other families in more affluent areas get as a sort of a byproduct of their upbringing, sort of the legacy that they live within. So it's sort of just recognizing where we are as a community, but also where we need to go, and understanding that the potential is there, but it's sort of how we seed that with the proper resources and opportunities. And again, that starts with this idea of lifelong learning. And one example that I give you is something that I championed that we didn't see in Linwood, but once I heard a statistic at an NALEO conference that I was on about early childhood education, is that when young people have a college savings plan in their name, they are 7 times more likely to attend college, right? That's not a stat that I had ever heard in Linwood, and I know that that's not common knowledge around our community as to college savings plan, but we wanted to make sure that was something that we gave to our students as a gift, so sort of an investment in their future going forward. So when kindergartners enroll in Linwood schools, they get a college savings plan in their name that is matched by the state and matched by our Linwood Foundation. And that sort of, again, is seeding this support, the goal of college attendance and persistence from an early age. That is, again, bookend by early childhood education, but also the robust partnership with our college and universities, in addition to our adult school offerings as well.
Yeah, I would agree. We're a Title I school district. We are approximately 70% free and reduced lunch, so a little bit less, but at half the size of Linwood. I think what's important is, as electeds, we live in community, right? Or at least me as an elected, I think it's important to go out and reach and be in community and talk to people and be accessible. And also understand that there's sometimes a language barrier. So who are the folks that we can actually talk to, who can actually really understand the needs of other community members? They may not be on your board, but they may not be on your staff or your cabinet, but you know who they are, the influences, right? To begin and change the culture and conversation around that. Love the CSA programs, right? The college savings account programs. We've been doing that through the Westside Home Run program as well. We also have different markers, but we actually begin further, and this is something that might be interesting, is that not just kindergartens enrolling in first grade. We actually, if you go to one of the listed schools on the Upper Westside Preschool that has been considered, have been doing kind of high quality, you actually get it when you enroll into the TK or kinder program in our school district, right? So we actually go a little bit further, that's how we create the network of private providers, that if you have a connection to us through PD that we've worked with at the city, that then you actually get that CSA upon TK or kinder enrollment. So that's a little bit of an extension of what President Hardy is doing, that we have actually seen a lot of interest in. I also want to say that kind of being data-driven and kind of creating a circle of inquiry and what I call curiosity amongst staff about how do we really, I don't know, I've been in education for a bit. We focus very much on K-12, on what those standards are. And TK and preschool kind of teachers and community, I'm not going to say that they're left behind, but it's just kind of different types of conversations. So how do we actually better integrate also within our K-12 infrastructure, bring in the TK kinder teachers into our intentional planning? And that's what we're doing with our strategic plan right now. We're in the middle of a strategic plan, a refresh of our strategic plan, and we're actually being more intentional because of this TK opportunity to invite more TK teachers to the table in the conversation around our long-term plan.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here today. And thank you again, Christina, for moderating this great panel. This concludes the Q&A. So thank you again for being here. And next, I would like to share that we're going to show this next video. This next preview is CCRC's Family Childcare Journeys, a YouTube series of educational videos that help families on their journey of finding the right childcare program, and that also support prospective providers in becoming licensed. Please enjoy.
Good morning, Amy. Ready for a new day? always ready.
Great. The first kids will be arriving at 7:30. Good morning, Kelly. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Miss Nancy.
Buenos días, Valerie.
Buenos días, Miss Nancy.
Ready to learn and have fun today, Valerie?
Yes.
Good morning, Miss Nancy. I just wanted to let you know that Valerie has loved coming here these last few weeks. I think I made a good decision bringing her to a family childcare home. She needed a place that looked like our house, and she's settling in nicely.
I'm so glad you and Valerie like it here. We try to make the environment as homey as possible so the kids feel comfortable and safe.
Yes, she feels right at home. She is learning a lot, but she's still worried about speaking English. I don't know if she's always able to express herself.
I understand your concern, but the kids at this age are able to pick up a new language pretty fast. Also, that is why we have bilingual staff, so the kids have language support when they need it.
From birth to age 5, a child's brain develops more than at any other time in life, and early brain development has a lasting impact on a child's ability to learn and succeed. A child's experience in their first few years, positive or negative, helps shape how their brain develops. Research shows that dual language learning may benefit a child's academic outcomes in school as well as shape certain cognitive skills, such as executive functioning.
This video is generously funded by Stein Early Childhood Development Fund.
That was such a cute video. Hope you all enjoyed that. I would now like to introduce Betty Zamorano Pedregon, who will be moderating the Child Care Provider Panel. Betty has been the director of CCRC's Head Start Birth to 5 and State Preschool Program since 2010. She is responsible for ensuring all Head Start and State Preschool Program mandates and standards of excellence are met on a daily basis for more than 3,000 children in the San Fernando and Antelope Valley. She has worked for CCRC for over 27 years in several leadership positions, including Head Start Health Coordinator, Director of Resource and Referral, and Head Start Assistant Director. Betty?
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne, and good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of leading this panel, so I'd like to introduce our Child Care Provider Panel. We have with us Lisa Wilkin, is the Executive Director of the Child Development Consortium of Los Angeles, a nonprofit organization that provides early care and education services for children from birth to kindergarten. Ms. Wilkin serves on the City of Los Angeles Mayor's Office Early Childhood Education Incumbent Workforce Work Group and the Los Angeles County Child Care Planning Committee, and is Public Policy Advisor for EveryChild California. Second, we have Heidi Escobar Rocha, is a licensed family child care provider in Van Nuys, and will be graduating this May with an Associate of Arts degree in Early Childhood Education. She's been working with children for over 10 years. She owns and operates Escobar Family Childcare and loves being able to help working families in her community. Heidi is a member, leader with SEIU Local 99 and Child Care Providers United. We also have Mary Catone, got her start at the Burbank Community YMCA in 2009 as the Director of Child Development, and has carried her passion for serving the younger generations throughout her career at the Y, including her former role as Chief Operating Officer and now as CEO. As a former preschool teacher, elementary school teacher, and college professor, Mary took her passion into the nonprofit sector, where she focuses on mission advancement in the areas of youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. So we're going to ask the panel some questions, and I'd like to remind the panel, I think everyone already has unmuted and turned on the video. So our first question is, what type of program do you run? Why don't we start with Lisa?
So the Child Development Consortium of Los Angeles, we have 11 childcare centers and 3 regional family childcare home education networks, and we call them fetchins. So if I talk about fetchins, you know what I'm talking about. Throughout LA County, we have about 25% of our families are full cost families, and 75% of our families receive some kind of state subsidy for childcare services, either through our CCTR, our CSPP contracts, or through AP vouchers at some of our childcare centers.
Thank you. Heidi?
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for having me. I've been a childcare provider for the past 10 years. Like you mentioned yourself, I will be completing my AA. I don't just provide care. I do believe that we provide an enriched educational program here based on the experience, the staff that we hire as well. We provide a lot of services for subsidized and private clients. Like I mentioned, it is what I consider a TK program, obviously not accredited, but hopefully with the Universal TK plan that I've been hearing all today, hopefully they'll pave a way for childcare providers to do more in this industry.
Thank you. Mary?
Yes, hello. So we are a one location YMCA, although we're a part of about almost 3,000 YMCAs across the country. But here in Burbank, we have 2 sites, one that's in combination with our local fitness facility and other childcare programs, after school programs, and a second location on a elementary school campus. And in total, it's about, 200-300 spots. We're about 90% full cost. We're a market rate childcare program. We provide financial assistance to those who apply, and we raise money for that. We did deliver more subsidized care in the past decade, but over the years, as the reimbursement rates didn't change at all. Being a small program, we just couldn't afford to provide care at the reimbursement rate. And since we don't receive any public funding whatsoever, we just kind of got pushed out of that position. But we are aspiring, actually, as we look to our future. We have about 34% enrollment now in a couple of the programs and about 70 in another, but COVID has really changed everything. So it's hard to describe our program today. It looks very different than it did just 2 years ago, right? But yeah, primarily market rate with a desire to do more and with some kind of financial constraints, but we're getting there.
Well, that's a good segue to this next question. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your childcare program enrollment? So let's go ahead and start with Lisa again.
All right, well, so I'm sure that nobody is surprised that our enrollment has declined. Most immediately, we have put a temporary pause on enrolling children for the month of January this year because there's so much of the COVID the COVID Omicron variant going around. We're just keep getting notified of exposure after exposure after exposure. Seems like it's much more rapid than it was last year. And so we decided that we were not going to enroll any new families until this wave has kind of passed, because I don't want to have to tell parents, yes, you can come, but next week you might have to keep your child home for 2 weeks. So just, in the immediate moment, we're intentionally not enrolling families. But I pulled some numbers up. In 2020, in January of 2020, we had 761 children attend on a daily basis. In January of 2021, it was 456 children. So a drop of 40% from 2020 to 2021. This year, we're at 581 in January, but it's still a drop of 24% from where we were in 2020 before the pandemic started. It's also changed the
proportion of our enrollment. So in 2020, we had 14% of our families infants, 17% toddlers, and 69% preschoolers. And in 2022, this year, it's 17% in infants. So an increase in infant enrollment and a decrease in preschool enrollment down to 65% of our enrollment. And our toddlers have gone up about 1%. But our most dramatic change has been in our part-day state preschool program. Because these are families who generally do not need the childcare. They're bringing their children to school for the socialization a lot of times, or school readiness things. And we've dropped from 2020 from 63 children a day to 27 children a day, which is a drop of 57%. So we've really, we've been really hit. And I'm pretty sure that everybody else who's going to be on this panel is going to give very similar numbers. So I'll pass that on.
Okay, Heidi?
Despite the physical risks that we take every day by remaining open, dating back about a year ago, our needs, at least my needs here for my community, was based solely for school age kids. 0 to 5 was no longer something that I had enrollments for, or I thought that there would be more coming through the door. I had to stay creative and to remain open. We catered for long distance, learners, because that was the only way for childcare providers to stay open. That was the on demand. We were the, school. We were a pit stop for some of my older kids because they weren't doing that in certain places. I do service from 0 to 12. So we did see elementary, we did see middle school, and, 9th grade, first year of high school. And it was here. This was their school. So I did see a more increment in school age kids enrollment than, 0 to 5. And now it's flipped, where I now see more kids in my mornings that left 2 years ago because of the fear of COVID. So you are seeing kids that do need the social interaction. And that's why parents are seeking, centers or homes that provide that stability, some sort of normalcy for a lot of the kids that stayed home during this pandemic. So, for us to stay open and functioning to our full capacity, we've had to rearrange our schedules. I think not just us, but everyone that works with children, because this is what our field entails. We find ways to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Heidi. Mary?
Yeah, so for us, very similar, right? The enrollment has just kind of crashed. One of the things that happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, when we remained open for essential workers, something in the making is our school district had an early childhood program that they just couldn't afford to run anymore. And so we took it on just last June, I said, because they went from 180 slot full day preschool program that and they handed it over to us with, I think, 42 students. And I thought, wow, how are we going to get this right? So we've been able to grow it a little bit, but mostly stabilize. The fear, we too have seen a dramatic shift over even before COVID, but even in COVID is off of the older age rooms and in the infant care setting. And we've been focused on infant care because nobody else in the community is doing it. The wait lists were 2 and 3 years long and nobody wanted to invest. It was too expensive. It's too expensive. And we just decided to step into that void, and the YMCA Burbank said, we'll work on infant care. And since then, we've opened up 2 or 3 more rooms. Now, of course, we're empty. We got all ready for an infant care explosion, and then COVID hit. And we had enrollment for opening in January, and we closed in 3 days. Mostly out of parents are fearful, right? They're like, okay, we're not doing this. Risk benefit. There's no risk benefit for me bringing my infant into a communal setting, or at least those are the kinds of things they're struggling with. Today, we're having a full Zoom with all parents on all the contingency plans, because the opening, the closing, the combining of rooms, and all of that chaos has got the stress of health and economics and politics is at a fever pitch. It's interesting you stopped enrollment for a month. It might, our school district's emergency, meeting tomorrow to decide if they stay open. It's all kind of connected for us. We have managed to keep our staff. We have tried so hard to keep our staff, healthy and supported. And so we haven't had much turnover, and that's really great. But I would say at this point, I'm on the list, right? We're getting to the point where we might have to close because we don't have anybody qualified to be in ratio. But our chief operating officer is qualified and I am qualified, and we're going in the classroom if that's what it takes, right? So, but all of our energy is spent on mechanics and health and safety. Care, instruction, learning. It's just, we're trying so hard, right? Heidi's going, yeah, we're really, but it's rough. It's really rough. And our committee for the city of Burbank, the childcare committee, disbanded years ago. There's no centralized kind of assessment going on the childcare needs issue. So I'm just stepping in, self-appointed, with the help of Patrick and others to sort of keep the assessment for all the kids in our community alive, because it just feels unaddressed for us. K-12 is getting all the energy, right? At least in our community.
I'm sorry, but thank you, Mary. You talked a bit about staffing issues right now. Our next question is, as we emerge from the pandemic, what staffing challenges does your childcare business face? Lisa, we'll start with you.
Where do I begin? Well, I assume that we're assuming that we are going to emerge from the pandemic, because it doesn't feel like it right now. It's been going on for a really, really, really long time, and every time we think that things are finally settling down, something else happens, like now. But we're a little concerned. We have. We're advertising for job openings. We have 140 classroom staff in our organization. And we have people who just left for, normal leaving reasons. But when we try and advertise for positions, we're either not getting any applicants or we're not getting any qualified applicants. And it, concerns us. We pay up to $25 an hour for a teacher with a permit, and we have a pretty fairly rich benefits package. And if we can't attract staff, I don't know what, programs who don't have the resources that we have are able to do it. We're very lucky because a lot of our programs are on LA County property, and so they charge us very, very minimal rent. But for people who are having to pay for their facilities, pay for a lot of the services that we get for in kind, I'm just not sure what that is. And then on top of that, we're piling on sorry to use the term piling on, but it feels like that sometimes. It's the TK expansion, because now my qualified teachers with bachelor's degrees, my most qualified, my most, knowledgeable teachers are probably going to leave, because no matter, we try and keep up with the school district wages, but we can't keep up with K-12 wages and benefits. It's just not there's just no possible way, particularly in our programs where parents are paying tuition out of pocket. So we're looking to figure out how to do it. But I will say, and I talked about this at another forum, is that I've been around a long time. And in the early 90s, I want to say, when we had the expansion of the class size reduction program, where school districts went from 30 kids in a classroom to 20 kids in a classroom, we had a massive exodus of teachers that at that point too. And it took us many, many years to build back to a place where we were getting really good people with good qualifications. You know, there's really, really good people in childcare all over the place that don't have the qualifications to meet the rules that we have to follow for our funding. But it took us quite a while, but we did it. And I guess, you know, one of the things I want to say is that for programs who are getting concerned about that it will resolve itself over time, just not sure how long it's going to take. So we're trying to stay optimistic and try to be very zen about it and say, if my really good, highly qualified, well-trained teachers are going into the K-12 system, then those kids who are going to transitional kindergarten and then in the grades are going to get some really good teachers. So that's it. That's what I want to say. That was my soapbox. Sorry.
Thank you. Heidi?
I mean, just to piggyback from what Lisa just, covered, it's pretty much the same. It's hard. I think one of my biggest expenses of last year has been staffing, finding adequate people. Mind you, yes, I run a childcare program. And you'd be like, well, what type of requirements do they need? It's like, I don't want to fill a spot just because I need extra eyes. I'm disservicing my kids and my families if I'm not providing the same program that I'm talking about. We're doing every day in and out. And though it did change to me, catering to K through, school age kids to 0 to 5, I want those families to feel that the staff that I have is, have the qualifications. And it's hard to $25. I wish, it's not even nowhere near our budget. Yeah. And when we hear universal, TK programs, it always crosses my mind, should I just close and run that course, do that instead. But then I think about the families that count on me, and it's not just me, it's a family business. So I have sisters, siblings that are doing the same type of schooling that I am doing now, just because we figured, this is changing, and it's changing for the better for our community. So it's better that we keep up than stay behind. So I'm always thinking like, there's another way that you can challenge me, another way that you can use and abuse me, but that is what's happening now. We need to find a way to grow with the industry. And staffing has been a problem since before the pandemic. And now with the pandemic, it feels like it's so saturated that it's so hard to find quality teachers. And now when it's changing things up again, we are left up in the air, just wondering, well, how will our programs run if all our good staff are willing to just jump onto what's new and better and shiny? And I'm like, I'll be right with you, but we just want to be able to help. I think we all have a purpose in life and we know what we want to do and we see it in our programs. So we just want to find a way to unify each other and help one another. And it just starts with the want. And I know that, if Lisa can persuade her staff to stay and they have the funding or, whatever it may be that her program needs, it's going to happen because she's going to make it happen. She's going to find a way to make it happen. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do now, is just trying to stay relevant to today's needs, especially for our kids.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been said. I can't compete with K-12 wages and benefits either. We generally lose staff to either K-12 or even Head Start programs, just programs that can offer more. The highest qualified folks are the ones that leave because of the qualifications in higher paying positions. The other, and we get either no in all my years to get no applicants from Indeed over a period of weeks is just kind of surreal. Usually we'd have to have staff to sort and like no applicants, or underqualified applicants, of course. We've toyed around with the idea of actually just trying to do our own training and mentoring program, taking anybody, 19-year-olds who love to work with kids and just training them up, sponsoring through education, sponsoring through their teacher credentialing process. We don't know what else to do. Otherwise, we just sort of wait and are passive. We're talking about those kinds of things. We haven't acted on any of it, but we are focusing on just the quality of the experience of being in our program, because we've always led with, really emerging play-based philosophy and emerging curriculum and all of the things that a lot of new early childhood providers really like to be in that space, and they want to work in that environment. If they're financially able to make those sacrifices, the quality of life in a teaching environment might be something we can offer them. Or we offered through the pandemic mental health day, free of charge. Like, we'll pay one day a month. You name it, you call the shots. If you say I need a mental health day, you got it. And trying to just increase the experience for workers is something we're focusing on right now. Right, the health and well-being of our staff, just so they'll find a desire to stay and grow with us, I guess. And if you guys have any other, the problem is so big, right? We have the same problem with lifeguards and other really critical minimum wage, entry-level positions have openings all over. And I'll end with this, that Wise across the nation, we talk regularly, of course, and in their childcare programs, there are many Wise that have capped capacity at 20, 30, 40%, because that's all they have staff for. And they have huge waiting lists. So the minute they hire, they can let more kids in. So they're actually not serving the needs because they don't have the staffs. And then some of us are with really low enrollment. So it's really community driven, kind of the market demand and what people are able to do. It kind of depends on the public health department too, and where restrictions are. So it's hard to get an equilibrium, I would say. But yeah, it's going to be years of building staff, right?
And building your own workforce is one of the ways that many providers are trying to address this issue. So our next question, and this has two parts. Have any families you served left childcare programs to enroll in transitional kindergarten? And can your business compete with TK programs offered by schools? Lisa?
So yes, definitely some families have left. Mostly right now, primarily those in our part day preschool programs, because again, it's kind of like almost apples to apples. It's part day to part day, part day, part year to part day, part year. We've had, parents who need a full day, full year program. A lot of them have stayed for ours, and I'll let Mary talk about the full cost families, because I think she probably has similar to what's going on with us. But our subsidized families, we've had the family fees have been waived for 2 years, so those families are not paying anything for childcare, even though they would any other year. So we expect that once the family fees go back into effect, that the parents will prefer to take their children to free transitional kindergarten and figure something out for the rest of the day and the rest of the school year. And I just, my ears perked up when Patrick mentioned in the video that they really like the concept of TK because it's free. And he's not alone. Who wouldn't want their child to get free childcare if it's available? But it just makes it very difficult for those of us who are trying, because of the economics of early childhood programs. There's a lot of talk about the community-based programs doing the wrap, the before and the after school care for these 4-year-olds who are going to TK. And, for us, at least economically, it would be very difficult for us to stay in business doing the wrap, and particularly because there's transportation issues. If you're not a school district program, you're probably not going to be located on the school district campus, which means that we would have to transport children from their elementary school to our program. And I think that's just going to be very difficult for us. I mean, I'll talk about a little later about what we're thinking about doing, but yeah, it's going to be, it's definitely, I think parents, plus school districts have gravitas, right? Parents don't necessarily, I mean, they think it's better, even if it's not better. I'm not saying it's not better. I'm just saying, I don't think parents do the evaluation of whether it's better or not based on what's actually happening in the classroom. I think that because it's school district, they assume that it's better. And so why wouldn't you take your child to a better free program if that's available to them?
Sure, yeah. Heidi?
I have lost children throughout the years, for a free TK program that is usually catered half day, and then they still need a provider to pick up. And I do provide pickup and drop off. The hassle is real, Lisa. I'm just letting you know right now. I cater to different schools in my area. I do a 3-mile radius. I have more than one person picking up. So it is a mission, from middle schools to elementaries to different, charter schools, depending where the child goes, because it's a free TK. I am a TK child, and my parents did do the same. And there was after school care, and that is, what they took advantage of. And from what I understand, some TK programs don't allow you to stay after school. They just do half day. So in a sense, as a childcare provider, we do fear that might change. And if that does change, then we are missing on the kids that we are now, running around to pick up after school. So as a childcare provider, I do fear that my services would be limited if there's other programs out there that will facilitate what I do. It's hard enough to compete. And then when you say free, who wouldn't, jump on that? So I have had parents leave and have a half day, and then I go pick up. And that tends to happen till, X amount of years, depending on how, if they still need me. But it is a fear of mine to see that one of the services that I provide, or I look very enticing than other providers, is a pickup and drop off isn't, something that they will need anymore. So then here you are finding ways to stay relevant to the needs of our community. So, it's a little bit of everything right now. It's uncertain. It's a different territory that we're dealing with.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, pretty much the same. We've lost a handful of folks over the years, and even out of TK, but same thing. Our parents are 2-parent household or 1-parent, just work, full time. They need full time care, and arranging for the midday pickup and the wraparound, and then we offered some, wraparound before and after, and so it in some ways it's just hurting the provider, right? So for some, if we were to not have, the all-day program works most efficiently from a financial perspective, but if we're doing a little before and a little after, and now we're taking all those spots, and now the organization can't actually, now we're receiving less income, and all of the the architecture of all that drop off and pick up and transportation and half day and whatever, it's just like it's not even practical. So we've opted to stay with the full day and not try and offer the after school for the pre-K and the TK, and they all get out at different times. In our district, they have staggered drop-offs and pickups because they don't have the ability to have all parents pick up at the same time. So our transportation system, so it's become this just bizarre drop-off pick, and we're spending hours and hours and hours of a day in drop-off and pickups and moving it. We're not even teaching anymore. It's just, it gets to be unruly. And then of course is the summer. So we'd like to provide TK actually, because we think we can do it better. Is anybody worried about developmentally appropriate practices for 4-year-olds in pre-K? Because we're still we encourage parents. We have bounce backs, right? We have a lot of bounce backs, right? They get free TK and they're going to work out there after school with grandma or whoever, and they do it for a while and then they come back. We have a few of those because their experience for their children has not been as positive, but that preconceived notion that, the public school can do it better is definitely there. But we're just eagerly awaiting this we have definitely been focusing our resource on infant and toddler and letting that piece of the public school education kind of go. I don't know how to do it. We're not set up to do both.
Yeah. Thank you. And we come to the last question, and we're running out of time. So what I'd like to do is ask you the last question and see if you can all give us a response in a minute or less. So our last question is, how will TK impact your childcare program? Lisa?
All right, so I got it down into 3 sentences. So teachers will leave, TK eligible children will leave, and we're going to convert classrooms to care for younger children because those are the children who are going to be there. It's just going to be more expensive because our preschoolers tend to subsidize our infants and toddlers. So if there's fewer preschoolers, it means less subsidy for infant families, and that's just how it's probably going to work for us.
Thank you. Heidi?
Pretty much the same answer that Lisa just mentioned. Those are one of our greatest fears, but you never know. Maybe we are included. Maybe we are being used and proposed to help and assist. And I think if that were the case and we have the proper, education and training, I think we'll all be vital members to this universal TK. I want to stay positive. So thanks.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, same. Staffing, mass exodus, space, staffing. It's going to be more expensive because we're going to be providing infant care through 3.5 years. And we're just going to have to make a shift somehow in the structure to support that. It's staffing. That's the main thing. And for parents who have to then navigate, I think we've created a new barrier, an obstacle for parents they don't need anymore. So the ones that maybe need the financial assistance or want the financial assistance, we now created a more chaotic, piecemeal experience for them. I'm sad about that. Anyway, I'm staying positive. I'm ready.
Well, I want to thank our panel members, Lisa Wilkin, Heidi Escobar Rocha, and Mary Catone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty, for moderating. And again, thank you, Mary, Lisa, and Heidi for joining us today. And thank you for everything you do for our families. And next, I want to cue Susan.
Actually, it's Bill. And I would like to present our final presenter, Nina Buthee, who will provide an overview of the efforts of the Universal Preschool Coalition to introduce mixed delivery into the California system. Nina joined EveryChild California as the executive director in 2005. In this role, she oversees a broad portfolio of association activities, working closely with its members and stakeholders to execute its strategic goals. EveryChild California is responsible for advocating and supporting the broad spectrum of publicly funded early care and education programs in the state of California. Ms. Buthee has over 20 years of experience in nonprofit management and business administration. Nina.
Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed the panel today. So I think I'm shifting gears a little bit and looking towards the future and looking towards some of the efforts around universal preschool and the pre-kindergarten program. And really, what are some of the opportunities and the aspirational pieces that we can put into place, kind of as our providers were talking about, how to be a little bit optimistic as we can look at building a system that we want and we deserve to have in the state of California. So we certainly are poised in a position right now with some Buildback Better and state investments into the early care and education program as a whole. And it really gives us the opportunity to have a bigger conversation, a more universal conversation about really where we are and where we should be. As Kristin Schumacher notated in her presentation, a tremendous amount of funds in the 21-22 state budget were focused on transitional Transitional Kindergarten. While this is a program that works for some families, it does not work for all families, especially many families that need full day, full year care, during extended and non-traditional hours, serving evenings and weekends. As we just heard from our providers, it's not a type of care that they're necessarily providing right now. And that transitional kindergarten is really part of the care continuum for 4-year-olds, equally as California State Preschool Program, Head Start, voucher care, and private care and center-based and family childcare homes are equally part of this continuum. So as we look towards the future and we look at states that have successfully implemented a universal preschool or pre-kindergarten program for 3- and 4-year-olds, they have all been successful because they've worked within the existing childcare structure, including community-based organizations, family childcare homes, and in-care homes, so that they do not dismantle the entire existing early care and education community. As again, we just heard from our providers, it's increasingly fragile right now. And we do know that we lost a tremendous amount of providers over the COVID pandemic. And certainly we do not want to institute a new program that will dismantle that even more. With that in mind, a diverse coalition of over 25 early care and education organizations, including statewide organizations, family childcare homes, centers, parents, unions, private pay, public play, Head Start, and more, have been working together and formed a coalition to create a white paper outlining what a successful universal preschool program would be in California, taking into account blending the current state and federal programs. This paper outlined a fully funded, integrated, mixed delivery universal preschool program, which would be provided in community childcare centers, settings, and school-based settings. This is built upon much of the work that was done by the Blue Ribbon Commission, by the Master Plan for Early Education that was done in the 90s, by ELQUIS, if those of you who remember that, and then certainly builds upon the most recent Master Plan for Early Education that was developed and released in December. The key tenets of this plan include parental choice. We all know that parental choice allows families to choose the setting that best meets the needs for their families and children. This was a key advocacy point of ECE advocates last year with the expansion of transitional kindergarten. Families who received subsidized care had the ability to keep that care if they chose to do so, rather than moving their child into transitional kindergarten. And as Lisa noted earlier, that has also been very beneficial with the waiving of the family fees right now. A mixed delivery universal preschool model preserves this parental choice, again, while retaining community-based capacities for all children birth through school age. This is a very important point, as cities and states that have rolled out a school-based only universal pre-kindergarten model have negatively impacted the stability of community-based programs, and programs have closed, further limiting the capacity for other age children, including school age and infants and toddlers. When we look at ratios and programming, families should have a broad access to all mixed program settings while not worrying about different out-of-pocket costs, such as free versus fee-based, and quality standards and health and safety standards should be the same. Programs would be held to ratios and standards that have been identified as developmentally appropriate, and school and community-based organizations would be held to the same learning standards. When we look at enrollment, we would be looking at a streamlined and centralized system, a one-stop shop, if you will, for families accessing care. This has been the desire for ECE programs throughout the years. However, it has never been funded at levels to make it attainable and possible. A very successful example was in New York City. Their pre-K online enrollment process is a one-stop shop for families, which shows a full list of preschool options in all different settings for families to choose from. As notated earlier, when we look at compensation and wages and compensation are incredibly low for the early care and education system. In this proposal, rates would cover the full cost of high quality care, and supports and wages would support the quality of life for providers. As we require teachers and providers to have qualifications similar to early elementary teachers, they should be compensated at commensurate levels. And then, as outlined in Buildback Better Universal Preschool, Universal Kindergarten program should create workforce pathways for all providers to meet the requirements and to increase quality levels for all type of providers. As notated earlier, the impact of COVID-19 in California, over 30% of our licensed programs have closed, and we cannot further exacerbate this issue by dismantling or shutting down any more of our childcare centers or family childcare homes. As such, this Universal Preschool Pre-Kindergarten program has a unique opportunity to build the kind of system we want and deserve to have in California. It is an opportunity to have a bigger conversation, and we need to look strategically at the system as a whole, not only through age-specific programs or one-time only money. This is our opportunity to advocate for a system that promotes consistency, equity, and access to all families. We should advocate for a universal preschool system that builds upon the strength of the existing system rather than creating a new bifurcated system that limits families' choices and jeopardizes the existence of established programs. For me, looking at the detailed issues of earlier presentations, this would allow for true community-oriented solutions that meet the diverse needs of our amazing communities in California, our children families. So thank you for the opportunity to share this proposal very briefly with you today. It is such a wonderful opportunity to advocate looking forward for all of our programs and families in California.
Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you to everyone who was part of our presentations today. We were so honored to have such qualified and knowledgeable panelists and moderators really start to dig in on the very issues that we will be tackling in our advocacy work in the year ahead. I wanted to underscore a couple quick things. I thought that Board President Gomez's comments that schools can't do this alone was really important. And I think that it really is going to take a whole village to build out a comprehensive early learning system in California. We are very excited to be part of the Universal Preschool Coalition that is working on the proposal Nina just presented. And I just would want to underscore that CCRC is a resource and referral agency. And there are resource and referral agencies in every community in California. And we are all situated to be partners for both private providers and schools as we navigate these waters. Lastly, I wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping. We did record today's session, so we will share it. It's going to come out in a blog post beginning of next week. It will have the video link, the slides, and we will also be sharing the white paper that Nina referenced, so that will come to all the attendees. We also will be continuing to update via our social media and our website throughout the advocacy season. As Kristin mentioned, we are on the precipice of a new budget proposal from Governor Newsom. It's the beginning of the legislative session. There'll be a lot of different legislative proposals and many, many opportunities for everyone to be involved and advocate for what is best for our children and our communities. Lastly, I want to thank the staff at CCRC who put on a seamless event. We pivoted right before the holidays to moving to all virtual, and I just kudos to my team. They did a great job, and I think it moved really quickly, and it was the fastest 2.5, 3 hours I've been through on a video webinar. So kudos to all of them. And lastly, thank you to our sponsors at First 5 Los Angeles. We really rely on them throughout the year, and it's so good to do this work with them.